أصلح قلوبنا اللهم أصلح قلوبنا اللهم أصلح قلوبنا اللهم اغفر ذنوبنا واستر عيوبنا واختم بالباقيات الصالحات أعمالنا اللهم ارزقنا الفهم عنك والبصيرة في أمرك والنفاذ في طاعتك. Oh Allah, we call upon you, we pray to you, beseech you, we ask you by your names and attributes to better us and to guide us and to make us steadfast. We ask you to enlighten our hearts with the nur of Islam. We ask you, Allah, to revive our hearts with the nur of Iman. We ask you, Allah, to rid our hearts of any diseases and to forgive us what we put forth and what we've delayed, what we've done publicly and what we've done privately, and what you're best aware of. We ask you, Allah, to guide us on our journey towards you, and to make us of those who are very aware of their souls and are very reflective of their actions, are very reflective on their actions. We ask you, Allah, to guide us to the path of Jannah. Allah, guide us to the path of Jannah, and grant us the spiritual bliss in this dunya before the akhirah. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma ameen. Wa akhiru da'wan alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Amma ba'd, jazakumullah khair for attending today as we continue in our course on diseases of the heart. Today we're going to be speaking about one central disease, and that is false hopes. And we're going to speak about maybe perhaps another one that's closely associated with it. And basically my hopes for this course is that it will continue to run until mid-August. So we have today's session, and then the 6th, and then the 13th, and that'll be the last class, inshallah. So 3 more sessions. And if you look at a handbook of spiritual medicine, my plan for this session and the next session is as follows. If you look at the index, you'll find that as he lists out the diseases, there's one, the second one, it's called antipathy towards death. Fear of death as a disease. Now, of course, not general fear, as we're going to explain. False hopes as a disease, not hope in itself, because hope in itself is central to Iman. These two closely associated with each other. False hopes, which we would refer to in Arabic as طول الأمل. Thinking that, a long time remains for me to correct, modify, seek forgiveness, and so on and so forth. That's what false hopes is in Arabic. طول الأمل. And antipathy towards death, which is, again, انقطاع الأمل. When death comes, فإذا جاء الأجل انقطع الأمل. Once death comes and that appointed hour comes, worldly hopes are cut off. Worldly hopes are cut off. So in that sense, they're related. So there's طول الأمل, looking at your life as though a lot of time remains for you to do the right thing. And then death, which symbolizes hope, worldly hope being cut off. And then we have the other two that are closely associated with each other, which we'll talk about more next time. Miserliness as a disease of the heart, and fear of poverty, the other side of this. So fear of poverty on one end, and miserliness on the other end. So that's what we're going to be discussing this week and next week, inshaAllah ta'ala. If you open to the section on false hope in your book, a handbook of spiritual medicine, we use this book, as we said before, to give us examples, to give us a good breakdown, an overview, if you want to say. But we go into detail, and there's a lot of detail on false hopes, طول الأمل, in the book Purification of the Heart. So that's the plan for today. Let's look at false hopes in a handbook of spiritual medicine. You could open to page 96. 96. Now, amal in itself, the Arabic word for hope, is a critical part of faith and Iman. The other side of this is, yes, despair, right? The despair, if you look at the Quranic description of despair, it makes it synonymous with disbelief. There's more than one verse that indicates this. One of them is when Sayyidina Ya'qub told his sons, as he was hoping and anticipating to be reunited with Yusuf alayhi salam, he said, يا بني يذهبوا فتحسسوا من يوسف وأخيه ولا تيأسوا من روح الله إنه لا ييأس من روح الله إلا القوم الكافرون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that Yaqub said to his sons, O my sons, go seek Yusuf and his brother, and don't despair from the mercy of Allah. Then he says, this is a general principle. إِنَّهُ لَا يَيْأَسُ مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ. Only disbelievers lose hope or utterly lose hope in Allah. That's who, and really, the whole idea in our philosophy on Iman as Muslims, the whole idea about believing in Allah Azza wa Jal builds within us a sense of hope. In fact, one of our arguments that we use against atheism, godlessness, is that it leads to a despairing attitude towards life, right? How is that so? If me doing all the right things means that I'm ultimately going to be in the same position that someone who did all the wrong things and got away with it during their lifetimes, what's the point of doing any good? What's the point of doing any good? Why should I be a good person if the people who do all the bad things are happy, they get their way, and ultimately we're all going to go back to the ground and wither within it? So this is actually one of our points of contention with this idea of atheism, is it creates a sense of despair from doing goodness in life, right? And you find people, these sentiments will build because people often assess the surface level. And how many times have you seen this, where someone got in a quarrel with someone, was wronged by another party? This person wronged me, they oppressed me, they took advantage of me. And as they look at the outer shell and the way that things appear, this person's happy. It looks like they moved on with their life. Why did they get to move on? And it seems like they're not being held accountable, right? And this kills people sometimes because, people feel the pain of the injury that this person caused, and they still see, that this person's at an advantage. Now the mu'min, again, the way the mu'min perceives dunya and looks at life is through a different lens completely. The mu'min advised, hey, look, people often perceive things as they appear, but things are rarely as they appear, right? As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. Rarely are things as they appear. And the only time you're actually able to see this, and is if you're able to see what's happening on the other side. That often doesn't happen for people unless they're in a position where they help people in their problems. How many times has someone been able to present themselves in a way as though they're happy, successful, high achieving, but the reality that they know of themselves is that it's very, very different than this. They're actually very depressed, confused. They feel very vulnerable, and again, appearances are very, very deceiving. So when it comes to getting back to the subject of amal, Iman gives me amal. Amal is important. Hope is important. I need to have hope. And in fact, the more Iman increases within, the more hopeful I will become as a human being. Hopeful in what? Hopeful in Allah. Hopeful in what Allah wants me to be hopeful in terms of worldly circumstance, otherworldly circumstance, hopeful in my situation in this dunya and in my situation in the akhirah, hopeful in people, even if they don't deserve hope. But the Prophet ﷺ, if you look at him, he was hopeful in people, right? When I find a voice within me trying to make me lose hope in people, I need to understand where this voice is coming from. Know that it's coming from the shaitan. How do I know that it's coming from the shaitan? Because the Prophet ﷺ was not of this disposition. And in fact, this one of the questions that was asked last week was about this whole idea of kashf and ilham. I'll speak a little bit about it more towards the end of the class, share with you something about it. But in fact, these kashf means for someone to have a spiritually discerning eye to see what's beyond the curtains, not to know the ghaib. إنه لا, as the Quran says, قُلْ لَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ الْغَيْبَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. No one knows the unseen except Allah, and except those whom Allah has given access to the unseen, like the prophets. No one knows the unseen. This is not in question. This is not in question. People, human beings, are not meant to know the unseen, ilm al-ghayb, except if Allah tells them about it, right? As the Quran says, the verse I just said, say, none know the ghaib except Allah. No one in the heavens and the earth knows the ghaib except Allah, right? So, but to have a spiritually discerning eye to see what's beyond the surface, that's something else. That's what we call in Arabic kashf or firasa. That comes about by magnifying, or I should say by bolstering one's spiritual state within. Meaning that the more my nafs conforms with what pleases Allah, with Sharia, the more my nafs becomes embodying the message of the Quran, the message of the Prophet ﷺ, the less whims have influence over me as a person, the less that whims have influence over me as a person, the more clarity I'll gain. That's basically what it is. So if you want to be able to discern whether a thought you're getting, this is what the question was, how do I know if it's from the shaitan or from Allah? The subject of assumptions, like we spoke about it in the context last week of, someone feeling when people are dishonest, feeling when that they could discern when people are genuine or disingenuous, right? We said this could be very, very deceiving, right? The nafs could be very deceiving. Be very careful not to assume quickly of others. So we said that, the answer to this question is, the more I am in a disposition that is closer to what pleases Allah, the more spiritual clarity I'll gain. That's the answer to this. Meaning that the more I adhere to what Allah commands, His Sharia, the teachings of His Prophet, the Sunnah of His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the more that I will be able to have a spiritual sense. You guys get what I'm trying to say? You guys get what I'm trying to say? Right? So, how did we get to that? When we're talking about these thoughts that come, having hope or losing hope, right? There's this idea of wahy al-shaytan, or there's this a satanic impulse, and then there's an angelic impulse, right? Meaning that wahy al-shaytan, wahy al-malaika, the influence, right? So there's a hadith that tells us this, that again, the angels are there not only praying for believers, but also encouraging goodness within believers, right? There's this thought that comes from Allah, from angels, and then there's this thought that comes from the shaitan. The one that comes from the shaitan is pulling me towards the direction away from Sharia, away from Allah's guidance. So next time I want to think, what? People don't deserve it. I hate people. People are always deceiving. People are always this and that. Tell your nafs right there, what did the Prophet ﷺ say to his detractors, or say about his detractors? What did he say about those people who transgressed against him in Ta'if? You might say, well, I'm not the Prophet. Well, aren't we meant to aspire to have that prophetic disposition? If he wasn't a model for me, then why did Allah send him to me? Right? I know I'm not the Prophet. I'll never arrive fully at these. But what am I allowing to dominate me from within? Am I allowing those thoughts that lead to despair to dominate, or those thoughts that lead to hope? What am I allowing to dominate? Again, there's a decision I need to make. Again, and this decision's going to have ripple effects on everything I choose in life. A person chooses to be positive, and a person chooses to be negative, regardless of their circumstance. Because if I want to look at my circumstances in life, I will always find indicators that point me in either direction. Everyone's like that, no matter how good or bad your life is. Proof of this, you will find some people who have the most difficult lives have a very positive perspective on it. It's not about what you experience. Again, this is really, you could underline this with three lines, right? Strike 3 lines under this. It's not about what you go through in life. It's how you choose to respond to it. It's not about what you go through in life. It's about how you choose to respond to it. That's what leads to the impact of things. Because things, sometimes massive things might have such a little, massively negative things, right? Might have such a minimal impact on you in terms of damage if you have a very strong spiritual disposition. Whereas minor things might have a massive impact on you if you have a very weak spiritual disposition. This is what our deen teaches us. Again, it's about what does disposition mean? Meaning your attitude, your mindset, your response, your inner response towards things. Wallahi, if you put this to the test, you'll find it one of the grand truths of life. You want to put it to the test? Look at the generation of the companions. Look at the generation. If you were to imagine a generation that had to deal with all different types of difficulties, you'll find that in the companions. You'll find they experienced depression, absolutely. You will find that they had family struggles, absolutely. You will find that they even had spiritual struggles, some of them. Absolutely. You'll find that they had the same influencers, toxic influencers in society that we have and more. Absolutely. Of course. If you don't know anything about Jahiliyyah, maybe I need to learn about what Jahiliyyah was. You really think that community was clean? You really think that the community in which Islam spread was a very clean community? It wasn't. They had slavery. They had a caste system in society. Women were inherited. They had no rights. That's the reality of it. They had, public indecency. Did you guys know that in Jahiliyyah, look at this Jahili attitude, before Islam, their understanding of the sacred space was, when I'm going to go do tawaf around the Kaaba, because they did it, and they went to that space, they had idols within the Kaaba and around the Kaaba, they needed to take off all of their garments fully, because their understanding was, these garments are for the world. Imagine that. A'udhu billah. Imagine from that fasad, that corruption of ideology, and that corruption of thought. That's how they were. They weren't a very chaste society that had justice. No, not at all. They were warring, feuding tribes. They had wars that started from absolute nonsense that raged on for decades. That's what it was, right? So what does this tell you? What does this tell you? If you look at the generation of the companions, Iman made within them a sense of hope that was able to rid the whole Arabian society of the darkness that was in it. Allahu Akbar. Again, that's what made the message of Islam spread. Again, this overwhelming hope in Allah and in humanity, by the way. Because if someone has no hope in humanity, what are they going to abandon? You answer the question. All right, why are we worried about losing hope in human beings? What disposition does this create if people lose hope in human beings? Answer it. All right, what does that mean? All right, that you're going to see them as animals, then what? You're going to dehumanize people. Jazakallah khair. Very good. You're going to dehumanize people. That's one. What else? What else? You're going to be, oh yeah, sure, you're going to be pessimistic, but beyond that, what else? What happens with that pessimism? Tell me, what happens? If you lose hope in people, what happens? Raise your hand, raise your hand. Go ahead, sister. Yes, it's going to lower the quality of relationships, or it's actually going to make, perhaps for some people, relationships non-existent in their life. They're going to isolate, right? Dehumanize, isolate. These are, man, this is gold for the shaitan. If he could get someone to isolate and someone to dehumanize those around him, these are gold weapons that he could get people to do. These are the doorways to how people do atrocious things to those around them and don't even care, right? You know, it leads to the heart hardening big time. If you don't humanize people, you're really willing to beat them when they're down and you won't care. All right, what else? Go ahead. You wanted to share something, Hajjah? Isolation. Jazakallah khair. Allah yabarik fika, Hajjah. Allah yakramak. There was someone else who said something. Losing trust, right? Yeah. You know, in fact, this is a pot of a lot of diseases that come about just by losing hope in people. Don't allow yourself to do it. You know, again, but that's not what we're talking about. That's not the subject of today. We're talking about hope, false hopes. That's what we're talking about. We want to get to this. But this is an important foundation to have. Iman builds within me hope. The generation of companion, a generation riddled with trials and difficulties, were still overwhelmingly hopeful individuals. And because of that, they had the care. You know what? If someone doesn't have hope in people, why should I give da'wah? Why should I try to be there to help people when they're in difficulties? Why should I try to spread the message of Islam? Why should I try to reform society? Forget about society. To hell with society. I'm just going to earn my money and I'm going to enjoy time with my family, and one day I'll die and we'll deal with that when I get to it, right? That's how a lot of people end up living. Why should I care about society? What has society done for me, right? It all just brings me a bunch of headaches and problems. I don't have hope in people. I'm not going to waste my time with society. Let someone else deal with that, right? These attitudes are so far from the prophetic disposition, so far from what Iman's supposed to trigger. But guess what? These feelings are very real. Someone who is aged in Iman, born in Iman, and lived for many years, might have these same thoughts. You know, actually, you might find these thoughts very dominant, very, very dominant even among Muslims. And this is the scary thing. And that's why, the spiritual path is supposed to create for me something different. It's supposed to give me a different experience with my Iman, right? So, getting to the subject of false hopes, look at what you see on the page. Look at what you see on this page. Page 96. Page 96. You see signs and symptoms, treatments, and exceptions. Now look, being an overwhelmingly hopeful person does not mean that you're not precautious, that you're not mindful of people's deception. That doesn't mean that. No one's saying, be gullible. No one's saying, be unwittingly trusting of anyone who comes into your life. No one's saying that. That's not what having hope in people means, right? Right. Other thing, when you lose hope, you're not forgiving. One of the worst characteristics to have as a human being is to have a very unforgiving nature. Wallahi, ruins so many things. Ruins so many things. Having an unforgiving nature, wallahi, you could just list. You could write books about that. What happens when people have an unforgiving nature? What does it do to their friendships? What does it do to their families? What does it do to their general interactions with everybody? What does it do to them in their workplace or in their studies or whatever? What does it mean to be an unforgiving human being, right? Anyway, but again, it doesn't mean to be gullible. It doesn't mean to be naive. It doesn't mean to be easily deceived. None of this at all. Let's read it a little bit, reflect on this book, and let's get into this one. This one is going to have a lot of meaty information for me. All right, so if you could just read Read to us the signs and symptoms on page 96. Can you read it?
Bismillah. Signs and symptoms: indifference, laziness, neglecting obligatory duties, superstitions.
Okay. Treatments?
Treatments: good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, establishing a balance between hope and fear, contemplating the hereafter, avoiding superstitions, prioritizing the hereafter by focusing on action in accordance with the pillars of Islam.
All right. Turn the page to page 98. Let's take some of these signs and symptoms in a little bit more detail. Go ahead.
Indifference, laziness, and neglecting obligatory duties. You show hard-heartedness and laziness or sloth, kasal, regarding matters of the hereafter. You believe that you will live for a long time, so you do not attach much of any importance to pondering over your mortality. You demonstrate an indifference, reluctance, or laziness towards fulfilling the obligatory acts of worship and other religious dictates.
But pause for a second. There's a verse in the Quran. You need to know it. It's relating to this subject. It's just about what we read there. Allah clearly states, look at this. لَيْسَ بِأَمَانِيِّكُمْ وَلَا أَمَانِيِّ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ. Right? So there is a word called hope, amal, and then there's another one called amani. Amani generally refers to wishful thinking or hope that's not really based in behavior, actions, not based in anything concrete that you're doing. So Allah says it's not by your wishful thinking or the wishful thinking of the people of the book. مَن يَعْمَلْ سُوءًا يُجْزَ بِهِ. Whoever does any wrongdoing will be called to account for it. This is a Quranic principle to live your life by. Actions have consequences. Those who don't have that understanding settle in will function in their lives with a very, very carefree attitude. Carefree. I don't really care. If someone doesn't realize the weight of their actions, they will not hold themselves responsible. If someone doesn't realize the weight of their actions, they will not hold themselves responsible. And the Prophet ﷺ tells us, he warns us, حَاسِبُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ قَبْلَ أَن تُحَاسَبُوا. Hold yourself accountable before you are held accountable. So again, this is an important verse. So you show hard-heartedness and laziness, kasal, regarding matters of the hereafter. Why? Because I always trust that there's a tomorrow. Why do I need to pray right now? I'm still young, vibrant with youth. I don't have any illnesses. I don't go to the doctor really. Everything's all good. Why do I have to pray now? I'll figure it out some later time in my life. Many people think like this. Why do I have to attend the masjid now? There are so many other things. I need to focus on building me up. I need to focus on my career, my education, my kada. Why do I need to wear the hijab now? I should get it up. Many people, they actually approach life with this attitude. They'll actually advise people like this. What kind of advice is this? Hey, you know what? Do it while you're young. Get it out of your system. Because if you don't enjoy yourself when you're young, then what? You're going to rebel when you're older. Allahu Akbar. It's as though it's taken from the mouth of the shaitan himself. It's as though it's taken from the mouth of the shaitan himself. Enjoy yourself when you're young. Have fun. If you don't get it out of your system, you're going to want to do it when you're older. Guess what? وَالنَّفْسُ كَالطِّفْلِ إِن تُهْمِلْهُ شَبَّ عَلَى حُبِّ الرَّضَاعِ. The nafs doesn't get satiated. If you give it, it's going to want more. It's not going to say, all right, you know what, I've had enough. I enjoyed myself, and now it's time to get serious with life. That's not the way it works. The Prophet ﷺ even tells us this in an authentic hadith. The Prophet ﷺ tells us, hey, if the son of Adam had a valley of gold, he'd want another. And if he had two, he'd want a third. Nothing will satiate the mouth of the son of Adam except dirt. That's the only thing. These are the words of the Prophet ﷺ. Nothing will satiate the son of Adam except dirt. Meaning when he's put in his ground. So this whole notion of I have more time, let me get it out of my system, is from the shaitan. Go ahead. Read to us more. You find reservoirs of energy.
You find reservoirs of energy when it comes to worldly matters, but are overcome with sloth, laziness when it comes to matters of the hereafter. You find excuses
You
for
know, how many of you guys were here for the Friday forum when Brother Ahmed Fahmy gave the presentation? A few guys are here. One of the beautiful things that he noted in the question and answers, he said that being too busy is an illusion. There's no one who is actually really too busy, to do something good in their lives. If they want to do it, if it's a priority to them, they'll find a way to do it. Of course, they say this in a simple way, where there's a will, there's a way. But in actuality, he's very, very true when he said this. May Allah reward him. He said, people, because sometimes there's this illusion that, I don't have time to go to the masjid for Isha during the week because, I have work the next day and I have responsibilities and, it's just too hard. Oh, I don't have time to learn and, I just have too many responsibilities. I have family, I have my kids and I have my work. I don't have time to learn about Islam or to study anything or to educate myself. It's been 20, 30 years since I've learned a thing, since I've sat in a classroom. There's no way I could do that right now, right? So on and so forth. The excuses, you'll find that when it comes to doing good things, the nafs pulls this person down. When it comes to doing nonsense, uselessness, right? You'll find the person finds this energy. Where did it come from? Allahu Akbar. Where did this person get the energy to endlessly scroll their phone? May Allah forgive us. Where did the person get the energy to watch a season a day of some show that they love, right? I'm off this weekend, I'm going to watch a full season. Allahu Akbar. It took him a year or a few months to put it out there, and it took me only 8 hours on a Saturday to consume it. Allahu Akbar, right? And again, I'm not talking about a minority. Everyone, بَلِ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا. Let's just leave it at that. People are witnesses over themselves. Am I really too busy? Ramadan comes around every year and tells us that, hey, guess what? If you wanted to do something good and experiencing something better and elevate yourself, you could. Right? Go ahead, read on.
You find excuses for neglecting prayer, salah, the foundation of spirituality, claiming that you are exhausted from the day's work. You hope for the hereafter but do nothing for it in terms of conduct and morality. All you have to show for your religiosity is the mere declaration of faith, a testimony unconfirmed by deeds, especially the obligatory and rites of worship, and charitable acts towards others.
I mean, what more do you want from me? I know Allah's forgiving and merciful. I pray, right? I fast Ramadan, I read some Quran, and come on, why are you asking so many things from me, right? So what do you want me to do more, right? But then when it comes to, so really, really it shows. If I really want to hold myself accountable, let me look at my week and see how much time in my week is really for Allah and how much time in my week is for my nafs. All right, let's take work, school out of the equation. Khalas, let's take them out. Let's look at your actual free time. Your actual free time. If you go 9 to 5, all right, when you go home all the way till the night, let's see how much of this time on a weekly basis is dedicated towards Allah versus what's dedicated towards me. If you're honest with yourself and you find a great disparity, then maybe this is a doorway for me to make some adjustments. Hey, you know what? If it's 20 hours in one bucket and 1 hour in another bucket, then maybe let me just distribute this a little bit better, right? Allahu A'lam. So go ahead. So we finished that. There's the superstition thing. Might be a little confusing. So go ahead, read that.
You have a near paranoid concern with superstition. The feeling that something bad will happen, exemplified by the following behavior. You avoid walking under any ladders. You stay clear of black cats. You associate the number 13 with bad luck. You support the stigma attached to breaking a mirror. You knock on wood to avoid bad luck. You routinely read the astrology page of the newspaper. You may even buy, sell stocks based on advice of an astrologer.
All right, so how does this relate to false hope? I don't know is that a thing? People buy and sell stocks based on advice from, I don't know. Anyway, but what is this superstition? How does it relate to false hopes? Basically what he's trying to say, these are examples of things in which people give something or someone power that overrides Allah Azza wa Jalla and His will. Wal-'iyadhu billah, right? Again, someone is born in a certain month, and I'm someone who's crazed with astrology, right? Oh man, I don't want to be friends with this. Oh no, I don't want to consider this person for marriage. They're born in this month. They must be a strong personality or whatever, some other foolishness that astrology is going to come up with to tell me who I should associate with or something of the sort, right? Superstition, right? I'm gonna even buy into some of the cultural nonsense that, again, it's subtle. Sometimes I might take it as a joke, but, again, someone says something, knock on wood, right? Knock on wood, right? A'udhu billah, knock on wood. What are you saying? How are you even allowing yourself to give something power other than Allah Azza wa Jal? Right? Sometimes, again, something that we spoke about recently, envy, hasad, right? When that exceeds its bounds, it falls under this too, right? When I give someone, as though they have like this extreme power that supersedes all, Allahu Akbar, they just look at me and I'm going to fall dead in my place. A'udhu billah. Right? If it gets to this point of, it becomes a disease itself, right? When someone really, really functions with this mindset, and it goes to an extreme. Again, be precautious. Don't, preserve your blessings. Al-'aynu haqq, no doubt. Our Prophet ﷺ taught us this. But when things exceed their bounds, they go from being something good to being something very, very, very bad. Right? So that's exactly what he means by that. Don't give anything or anyone power that overrides the will of Allah Azza wa Jal, or that your nafs thinks overrides the will of Allah Azza wa Jal. Near paranoid concern with superstition. That's what he means by false hopes. Now, let's put this book aside. Let's read from this. Purification of the heart. Purification of the heart. Look, if you have the book, it's on page 69, by the way. Page 69. طول الأمل. Before we read it, before reading it, look at this. The Prophet ﷺ and the companions, they functioned with a mindset. What was this mindset? It's called قصر الأمل. And this is exemplified in one of the statements, I think it was of Ibn Abbas. إذا أصبحت فلا تنتظر المساء وإذا أمسيت فلا تنتظر الصباح. If you lived to see daybreak, don't expect to see sunset. And if you lived to see sunset, don't expect to stay alive until the morning. What does that mean? Seize the moment. And this is called ibadatul waqt, right? Ibadatul waqt is to give every moment in your life its due right. Now, of course, we don't mean to take this in literals, right? But if you're ever able to get to that state of mind where you're really discharging all of your responsibility, that's what's sought here. It's not mean to stigmatize death. And I'm this person who's always thinking about death, and I'm going to die, and I'm going to die, and I'm going to die. Because again, that needs a balance too. There's fear of death, and when that becomes, that could even itself, fear of death could become a disease. We're going to talk about this disease. It could be a disease. Islam doesn't want me to think of death to trigger fear and fear alone, right? Think about that. Islam doesn't want me to think about death to trigger fear and fear alone. It wants me to gain something through triggering this emotion, this fear. Fear is not sought in itself. It wants to push me to do action. And that's why we said, Surah Al-Mulk gives us this principle. Again, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. The one who created death and life to test you. Who will be the best of deeds? Why mention death first? Because that's what really causes people to wake up. Right? How many times? Again, sometimes you'll wake up multiple times during your life. A friend dies, a family member dies, you wake up. Are you going to stay awake or go deep back into sleep? Depends. What are you going to do with that spiritual awakening? What are you going to do with it? Many times people go through this cycle. Someone dies, wakes me up, opens my eyes, and then I find myself forgetting very, very quickly, right? So anyway, but the point here is, it's not meant to be about death for the sake of death. I'm not meant to be this gloomy, dark person who always is awaiting their exit from this dunya. No. If I go about it that way, that's the wrong way to go about it. But the Quran tells us this: يود أحدهم لو يعمر ألف سنة وما هو بمزحزحه من العذاب أن يعمر. This false hope that is triggered by this thought, that this hope to live for 1,000 years is not going to save you from the ultimate reality of accountability in the akhirah. Even if you lived 1,000 years, it's not going to save you from hell, the fire of hell, if you do all the wrong things, right? So this principle, right? They said this principle long ago. They said, اعمل لآخرتك اعمل لدنياك كأنك تعيش أبدا واعمل لآخرتك كأنك تموت غدا. Right? Do for your dunya as though you're going to live forever, and do for your akhirah as though you're going to die tomorrow. That's the balance that needs to be triggered. Let's read and reflect. All right, go ahead. Read from page 69. Read from the discussion. Imam Mawlud.
Imam Mawlud speaks next of a quick-acting poison that produces an inordinate attachment to worldly concerns, which is a cause of so many diseases of the heart. This poison is extended hope. That is assuring oneself that death is a long way off, a mental environment that leads people to live their days as if a long life is guaranteed. The dangers of this delusion are self-evident. But before speaking about the perils inherently in this malady, it must be said that in some way extended hope is a necessary human condition. Scholars have said that if people did not have hope, no one would have ever bothered planting a single tree. If one was sure that he was going to die very soon, he would not have planted an orchard or had children. There would be no infrastructure for the next generation. But because human beings do have aspirations, they sow orchards and the like. A famous Persian story speaks of Shah who passed by an old man planting an olive tree, which takes decades to produce good fruit. The Shah asked, "Do you believe this tree will have any benefit to you, old man? You will die before it bears fruit." The old man replied, "Those before me planted and we benefited. We should plant so that the others after us might benefit."
Yeah, and these are universal things. You'll find these sentiments that universal people, these understandings, they're not limited to Islam. But there's something really, really, really important to take away from here. Again, false hopes doesn't mean I should lose hopes, right? This idea of false hopes being a disease doesn't mean I should lose hope altogether. Because if that's the case, I won't plan for my life. I need to plan for my life. I need to plan for my children. One of the fundamental things that we take from the Prophet ﷺ is life is strategic planning. The Prophet ﷺ was a brilliant strategist. The Prophet ﷺ was a brilliant strategist. You take this from the Prophet ﷺ's life on many levels throughout. He gave clear thought, ﷺ, to his dunya. So that's one of the very, very important takeaways from here. But he at the same time, look at this hadith, it's authentic hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said the following: "ما أنا في الدنيا إلا كراكب استظل تحت الشجرة ثم راح وتركها." The Prophet ﷺ said, "I am in this dunya like a rider who sought shade, and then after a period of time he carried on with his journey." Right? This is "كن في الدنيا كأنك غريب أو عابر سبيل." That's another hadith. Prophet ﷺ also said, be in this dunya as though you are a stranger or someone who is passing through, a passerby. And there's a lot, this is a very short hadith. What does that mean? What does that entail? Just think about it yourself. Like, say if you're going on some trip, right? You took a flight to a certain country. You're going to be there for a few weeks, and then you're going to come back, right? One of the things that you're greatly limited on in this journey is what? What do you think? If you're going to go and come back, what are you greatly limited on? Huh? Well, you're greatly limited on time. That's a good point, right? So if I'm going to this place, like, as I imagine, like say if you're going to Umrah, right? Like that's a good example for people, religious-minded people, right? So, so say if I'm going to Umrah, I'm gonna be there in Mecca for 5 nights, right? What are you gonna do for those 5 nights? Well, if you realize the greatness of the moment, you will try to seize every second. You'll limit your sleep. You'll stay in the. You'll do things that you've never thought that you would do, right? You know, one of the very, very interesting things that, you know, how many of you have gone Umrah before? How many? Raise your hand. Have you gone Umrah? Raise your hand. A bunch of people have gone Umrah. All right. One of the things. Have you ever gone to the Masjid Nabawi? You guys see when they block off the space in the main masjid with when they want to do the vacuuming? You see that? You guys ever see that? Right, all right. What happens when they finish vacuuming and these poor masjid workers, poor masjid, because I feel, you know, sometimes you feel bad for them. Not because they're poor. You feel bad for them because of what they have to deal with in terms of the crowds. What happens, you know, when they remove the divider? What happens? What have you seen? What have you seen? Where do people try to go? Where do people try to grow? Where? To the where? The Kaaba? I'm talking about Medina, Masjid Nabawi. Where do they try to go? Very specific space. Where do they try to go? What color is the carpet? It's a different color carpet, right? It's a green carpet in that area. And what do people, you find grown men with beards this long, gray, they're like 67 years old, yet they're running like they're 20 years old, they're racing. I want to get into a spot in the Rawdah. Where on earth can you get to see a 70-year-old man or woman run that fast other than that location? You don't find it, right? It's, subhanallah, you know, it's amazing, right? That's that space of goodness. But what's the reflection here? People want to seize every single moment. They want to take advantage of it. And you know, if you're there, if you've gone before, or a few days in, sometimes when you first go there, you don't really know how the system works. So you might need to like. But if you experienced it, you even know where they open the curtain from, where they open that barrier from, right? And you'll find there's harnesses there. And again, the poor masjid workers, like he's like on one leg, he's waiting to race away because there's going to be this stampede, and he wants to get out of the way before people knock him over, right? So you even know where to stand because this is where they're going to open it first, and it's going to give me the best chance to get into the Rawdah, right? Have you ever done this? Have any of you guys done that before? Any of you? All right, yeah. If you've tried it, you know what I'm talking about, right? But it shows you, right? You're limited on time. So say if it's not, if it's not Medina, if it's not Umrah, people are going on a vacation, right? They don't want to stay sleeping in the hotel. They're gonna like pack their day with this exhausting trip. So you need to go, in the morning we're going here, in the afternoon we're going there, and at night we're going to go there, and then this and that. It's like it's this week of extreme exhaustion because I need to get every single minute in of fun because I don't know if I'm going to come back to this country or not, right? So again, right, limited on time. What else are you limited on? What is it? Why are you limited on possessions? Very good point. Why? Yeah, of course. I only got 1 or 2 bags. There's a limited amount of things I could put in this bag, right? And I'm going to take it back home with me, right? So if I am abiru sabil, as the Prophet ﷺ said, I'm a passerby, I'm going to be very thoughtful in terms of what I invest in. I'm not going to like buy a bunch of like, things that are just going to weigh me down, and I want it to be something meaningful. I want to take back from this country or this trip or whatever it is. I want it to be the best, right? And that's going to differ from person to person. Some people might go to Umrah and they'll come back with a luggage of dates because that to them is the most meaningful thing. And other people go back and bring back a luggage of clothing because that's the most meaningful thing. Again, every people are different. Wallahi, this is, what we call this? What is this called? The Prophet ﷺ's ability to express something that takes you a very long time to reflect on. What do we call that? What do we call that? The Prophet ﷺ was given this ability. It's called Jawami'ul Kalim. You'll find that many of the hadiths of the Prophet ﷺ have this feature to them. They're very, very deep statements that are very profound and very limited in their wording. Jawami'ul Kalim, pearls of wisdom. All right, go on, read on for us. I want you to read from Extended Hope Definitely Has Its Place.
Extended hope definitely has its place. In fact, it's a mercy from God that we are capable of it. Otherwise, no one would embark on the course of education, for example, or undertake any endeavor that requires years before completion. Taking it a step further, one of the problems of modern society and the apocalyptic nature of the age we live in is that people are beginning to lose hope in the future. This is especially true among our youth, who are becoming nihilistic, taking a morbid perspective on the world. We live in a fast food culture in which we are led to believe that we need to have everything now. It is a culture that causes people to lose a sense of future worth waiting for. Only recently have we seen the first generation in American history that in many ways will be materially worse off than their parents. Prior to this age, Americans were noted for their cheery optimism about the future.
Very interesting. If you think about society and consumption in the modern day in comparison to the past, you'll find something, people are, human beings are destroying the earth at a rapid pace in the past 100 years than all of human history put together, right? All of human history put together has not been able to do so much damage to the earth that the past 100 years have been able to do. It shows you about people and their priorities. Again, this, their value of life. Again, when we talk about weapons and wars and countries' budgets and their focus, it tells you a lot about where the human psyche is on this issue. Go ahead.
The extended hope that Imam Maulud calls a poison is akin to false hope that generates hard-heartedness and indolence due to the heedlessness of the hereafter. When one believes that he or she will live for a long time, what ensues is a diminution of pondering one's mortality and a sense of independence from Allah. Fudal ibn Iyad, a great early scholar and man of asceticism, said that the world is divided into two types of people: felicitous, Sa'id, and wretched, Shaqi. No third category exists.
Exactly. Look. This is a really critical thing to understand here. One of the things that happens because of false hopes is heedlessness, ghafla. That's a disease we already spoke about. We already spoke about heedlessness and the spiritual paralysis that it causes. He says here that, look, people are two categories, no third. Ashqiya, su'ada. This pursuit of happiness, again, we're talking about hope here, false hopes, makes you think about what really leads to happiness. This pursuit for happiness is a fundamental pursuit, that all human beings have. Everyone wants to be happy. Everyone wants to be happy. But what leads to true sa'ada and what leads to true shaqawa? What leads to true happiness? What leads to true wretchedness? Capitalism, materialism will lead you to believe that it is material, tangible things that create happiness. But reality shows us that that's the furthest thing from the truth. The realities of happiness and wretchedness, these are realities within the person's heart. And that's why in the very beginning of today's talk we said what? It's not about what you experience. It's about how you choose to react to it. The reality of dunya. It's not about, he goes on to say this, the pursuit of happiness, again, a fundamental human pursuit. What defines your happiness? If it's something outward, guess what? You're not going to be happy very long. If your happiness is defined by something exterior to you, then your happiness is going to last as long as that thing lasts. And guess what? All outward, external things, they diminish. Everything diminishes. كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام. Everything upon its surface will diminish. What leads to these realities of happiness? Again, what are you banking it on? The worst thing you could possibly do is to bank it on the material. I'm happy because I'm wealthy, guess what? Wealthy people are not always happy. In fact, they're very often not happy at all, because the enjoyment of their wealth is lost by mistrust of those around them and fear of loss of the items that they have. Fear of loss. Again, who's going to take advantage of me? Who's the next person who's going to file a lawsuit against me? Right? What's going to happen with this business or that business? It doesn't mean that, wealthiness is something, looked down upon. Well, it's not. But we need to really consider the results. Hey, look, you're looking at it all wrong. If you're linking happiness to wealth, you're taking a very flawed approach. If you're linking happiness to a certain individual, guess what? You're also setting yourself up for that. You're also setting up for heartache. Your heartache. Again, a lot of young people who are approaching marriage, this is really, really critical advice to them. That's why, as I said before, I said it in a previous class, hey, you really want to, have a class on, premarital counseling or something about preparing for marriage, talk about disease of the heart. Well, Allah has that far-reaching effect. If you really think that fulan or fulana is going to make you happy, guess what? They're not. Even if you stay with fulan or fulana, it's not from individuals. It's from something within you, right? Right. So this is a critical point that he says here. For most today, however, happiness is pursued through acquisition and enjoyment of material goods. The human being is a creature that cannot pursue two things simultaneously, especially when they are on opposite poles of the universe. Again, this is a critical point. He mentioned this on page 71. Right? The Quran says it. All right. When you read it as his words, it might make you feel like, well, no, why? I could multitask, right? But the Quran says, مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِرَجُلٍ مِّن قَلْبَيْنِ فِي جَوْفِهِ. What is your ultimate? Yeah, you could multitask with things that are ultimately going to the same end. But hey, guess what? If they are absolutely diverging things, the more you focus on this, the less you focus on that. The more you focus on this, the less you focus on that. That's the reality of it, right? So he says here, the Quran says, مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِرَجُلٍ مِّن قَلْبَيْنِ. Allah hasn't given a human being two hearts within him, right? That's why, again, when you're thinking and you're assessing your worldly affairs, assess them through that lens. Is this really going to lead me down the direction I'm going to go? Or am I going to create a reality where it's pulling in two different ways? If it's pulling in two different ways, then guess what? You in between, you're going to snap. You're not going to be happy. You're not going to be happy. All right, go ahead. Read from where he says the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ made a spectacular supplication.
The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ made a spectacular supplication. O Allah, if you are not angry with me, then I do not care what you do with me. In other words, if my life is toilsome and difficult, but I have not incurred your wrath, then I am happy with that. He is happy because he knows that the real life, the everlasting existence, is in the hereafter. Right,
it all goes back to your understandings and your realizations. إِن لَمْ يَكُنْ بِكَ غَضَبٌ عَلَيَّ فَلَا أُبَالِي. If I'm really sincere in saying these words, again, that's what the dua says there. If you're not angry with me, then I do not care what you do with me. Meaning that it's not meaning that I'm wishing for difficulty. No. Don't ever wish for difficulty. You don't know if you'll be able to withstand it. Don't want hardship for yourself. No. The mu'min should never want that. But if my understanding is that this is ultimately what's going to make me happy, Allah's ridha, His pleasure, then guess what? Everything else is going to wane in the face of it, right? And again, these are things that are easier said than done, right? When you're talking about this in the context of loss, loss of health, loss of wealth, loss of children, again, it's this immense struggle. But sometimes you're put through these struggles to be emancipated. You guys know what I mean? To be liberated and freed from something, right? So emancipation, like emancipation of a slave, right? So think of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam in this context. He was given a son, then told to sacrifice this son so that he could be liberated from this attachment that is not in line with what Allah wants from him. Allah wanted him to submit even in this regard so that he could be a person who experiences utter submission. Hey, this is a way to look at your wealth, your health, and your relationships. Look at it like this. Try. Wallahi, it's not easy. Wallahi. Again, who said the spiritual path is easy? Right? Who said it's easy? No, it's not easy for any of us. Again, if you're someone who has a minimal amount of money and you lost half of your wealth, and that doesn't make you sad or angry, then there's probably something wrong with you. There's probably something wrong with you if you just like, I only got $50,000 and I was cheated out of 40,000 of them. I only got 10 left, right? If that could happen to you and you're not going to be upset or sad, then there's probably something wrong with you, right? Normally, it's going to trigger that, but now, there's response versus response, right? Right? This could happen to them, and it could derail their entire life. I'm going to fight tooth and nail with this person, and I'm going to do everything I can to get back at them. Everything. I don't care. I'm going to lose sleep. I'm going to lose my health over this, and I'm going to fight them in the courts. I'm going to spread rumors about them. I'm going to fight, right? Versus someone who has the strength to really contain themselves and realize, hey, you know what? If I don't get worldly justice, I'm going to pursue worldly justice. But if I don't get worldly justice, I will get otherworldly justice. And I'm comforted by this. Compare the two realities. Wallahi, you see this. Wallahi, you see this. People end up with so much stress that they actually die because of it. They get heart attacks because of what? They're overwhelmed by this worldly circumstance that really wasn't worth it. Really, really wasn't worth it. And it happens with other things. Again, the people, when they're in contentious situations, the worst comes out. And that's why, when it comes to the subject of talaq, the Quran, Surah Al-Talaq, the surah about divorce, it's the surah, the most thing mentioned the most thing mentioned in the chapter on divorce in the Quran, you know what the most thing is mentioned? Actually, the process, that's limited to a certain number of verses in it. The process, the procedural stuff in the Surah Al-Talaq in the Quran, the procedural stuff, that's limited. You know what's mentioned more? Taqwa. That's the most mentioned thing in Surah Al-Talaq. Taqwa. God consciousness. Why? Because you know what? The reality is going to end. But who are you going to become as a person? And this is what we're talking about here. We're not talking about losing emotions to normal human feelings. That's not what it means. No. But where's my happiness? Where does it lie? What's triggering it? What has the overpowering influence over me? Think about this. Think about that. Let's read on because we're running out of time. Let's read on. Fudayl ibn Iyad.
Fudayl ibn Iyad said that there are well-known signs of wretchedness.
This is critical to pay attention to here. He's going to give you, I think, 4 signs of wretchedness. What are the signs of shaqawa? What are the signs of wretchedness? Let's see what he tells us.
The first is having a hard heart.
Allahu Akbar. The first sign of shaqawa is being someone who has a hard heart. Qasi, qalb qasi, has a sense of qaswa. He could see people in all kinds of emotional distress or worldly difficulty, and it doesn't faze him. That's a scary disposition to have. And the Prophet ﷺ was a very soft-hearted person. May Allah forgive us, may Allah protect us, may Allah better us. Allahumma ameen.
Ameen.
What does he say? Go ahead.
A man saw the Prophet ﷺ kiss a baby and asked him, "Do you kiss your children?" The Prophet ﷺ said, "Indeed I do." The man then said, "I have 10 children and I never kissed any of them," which said that if you were able to see the Muslims who fought at Badr, we would think that they were madmen because of their disregard of the world. But if these companions saw the best of you, they would say, "These people have no character." And if they saw the worst of you, they would say, "These people do not believe in the Day of Judgment." There's a popular saying, often erroneously identified as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, "Act for your world as if you will live forever, and act for your hereafter as if you were going to die tomorrow."
Where'd you go?
Oh, I skipped?
Yeah. All right, go back to that. The Prophet ﷺ replied, "There's nothing in my religion." He's using the PDF, so it's a little different by him.
Oh, it's different?
What happened? What do you have after?
So the first is having a hard heart.
I never kissed any of them.
I never kissed any of them. Then I said, which said that if you were able to see the Muslims who fought at Badr, which doesn't really make sense.
All right. So that there's a problem there. I'll read it.
Okay.
To that the Prophet ﷺ replied, there is nothing in my religion for a man whose heart is void of mercy. Right? The Prophet ﷺ said also, have mercy on those on earth, and he who is in the heaven will have mercy on you. Scholars have said that if you want to know whether or not your heart is hard, then look at your eye. If it is dry and unmoved to tears, this is an indication of a hard heart. This is called jumud al-ayn, or an unmoved eye. A person who has sympathy and softness in the heart is said to have a moistened eye. Now look, there's a lot to think about in this. Look, sometimes our circumstances in life make it that expression of emotion or our ability to express emotion dies away. Happens. People get emotionally wounded so many times that they can't express emotion. Sometimes people, they don't even know what's wrong with them. Like, I don't know, like something bad's happening. I should be sad, I should be crying, but I can't cry. Some people are like, I just can't cry. I don't know what's wrong. I remember one of the brothers, he went to Hajj, and this is actually a very overwhelming thing for him, because he saw everyone around him very, very emotional and very teary about the experience, and he felt so overwhelmed because no matter what he was experiencing, he just didn't feel that, he felt like he couldn't cry. He couldn't experience khushu', he couldn't concentrate. And it made him feel guilty that he's a bad person, until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed something to soften his heart. But this idea of, look, again, kufr, what does it mean? Kufr means to create a barrier, a divide. It means to disassociate my physical self from my spiritual reality, from it means to create a barrier between the physical and the metaphysical. That my soul and my body, they're disassociated. That's what kufr is. What does it mean? That's what kufr is, because what? The body begins to function in a way that the soul can't live. The person starts suffocating because they're not tending to their soul. They're not really nurturing their soul, because the only way the soul is nurtured is by surrendering to Allah, right? So that's what kufr is. And if you look at this in a different way, building a healthy spiritual reality within helps me experience a more wholesome sense of humanity. And really, that's what it is. Building a healthy spiritual reality within grants me a more wholesome human experience. How's that? Again, you look at this. Again, if you look at this in the range of what the Quran says, you will find that Quran often describes hypocrites as being people who are in great emotional distress. Now again, no one should misunderstand this, that if they experience, emotional volatility, that means they're a hypocrite. No, that's not what we're saying. But one of the effects of hypocrisy is that it makes this person unable to experience their emotions in a healthy way. That's what happens. Again, exaggerated praise, exaggerated anger, right? There's this sense of hypocrites. They have this, because they know themselves, right? They have to excessively take oaths. There are people who, whenever a difficulty happens, they're on the fence, right? Whenever difficulty, I have nothing to do with it. It's not me. Deal with it. It's their problem, right? Whenever victory happens, they're coming. I was with you guys, right? I was one of your greatest supporters. Right? Again, a feature of hypocrisy. Again, and then you'll find كثرة الحلف, excessively taking oaths. And again, يحسبون كل صيحة عليهم. They think that every calamity will be their end. They have no trust in Allah. Again, a lot of this is emotional distress, right? But now sometimes people experience emotional distress for other reasons, right? Because there's chemical imbalance in the body, or because they don't have the emotional intelligence to give them control over this aspect of their lives. It's not always due to hypocrisy, right? But one of the things that Iman does on the other sense is it makes me stronger emotionally. That's what Iman does. That's why when you go to mental health counselors, when you go to professionals in this field, what will they tell you? One of the best things that will help you out is what? a strong sense of spirituality. You know, you become devout, practicing of your religion. It's going to help you with a lot of these symptoms. It's going to help you control you. It's going to help calm you down, right? It might not make it go away completely, because again, there's certain realities in the body that are a test from Allah, right? So, but it'll help you control this. So that's what he's talking about here. You know, in fact, the Quran tells us to, the Prophet ﷺ tells us to do this when we read the Quran. The Prophet, there's a hadith that says this, look, when you read the Quran, then read it with, you know, a very emotional sense. And if you're unable to cry, then فَإِن لَمْ تَبْكُوا فَتَبَاكَوْا. If you're unable to cry, try to move yourself to crying. Because experiencing this emotion is really important for your heart. Even when someone dies, like you have a family member who dies, in fact, one of the sunnah practices is, if you can't cry, then what? If you can't cry, then the people should try to help this person to cry. Should try to help move this person to cry, because it's an important emotional experience at death that helps quell the emotions, right? Don't keep it bottled in. Don't suffocate yourself. It's not good, right? So anyway, because we're getting short on time, I'm going to summarize here what he has for you. So the first symptom of shaqawa, wretchedness, is having a hard heart. You're unfazed to the struggles, plights of others. You're unable to express emotion. He says, the hadith states that the second sign of wretchedness is a lack of modesty or shame, right? إن مما أدرك الناس من كلام النبوة الأولى إذا لم تستحي فاصنع ما شئت. Prophet ﷺ says this, that, so losing this sense of modesty or shame causes the person to have no boundaries. That's one of the signs of a hard heart. That's one of the signs of wretchedness. The second sign of wretchedness is loss of modesty or shame, hence the person has no boundaries. The third sign is coveting the world. Coveting is a strong word. Again, we're not talking about loving good things in life. You should love the things Allah blessed you with, your money, your business, your education, your children, your care. You should love these things. You're not meant to hate them, right? So he says, it is said that no one increases his good share in the hereafter without incurring loss in his worldly affairs. And no one increases his worldly affairs without diminishing or harming his share in the hereafter. Because the two realms are opposites. An increase in one is a decrease in the other. This does not mean that wealthy people automatically have diminished shares in the hereafter. This is a very important point to understand. But it's telling you what? What is your utmost attachment? Is your utmost attachment to something material? Guess what? If that's the case, then your attachment to the immaterial, to Allah, is going to be less. What's your utmost attachment? What's your utmost meaning? All right, how can I put this to the test? How can I put this to the test? All right. I'm in a situation where I have a job that is going to force me to decide between keeping the job or seeking what pleases Allah. What's going to hurt me more? Losing the job or losing Allah's rida? Say if that's the situation. Mathalan, you're forced between two realities. Forget about the details. Either I start missing Jum'ah or I abandon the job. Those are the two choices I have. If that was the situation. Then what's going to hurt me more? That'll tell me where my attachment is. That will tell me where my sense of priority is. Look, there's a hadith that says this. The hadith says, this hadith is an authentic hadith. Look, it says the following. The Prophet ﷺ said, قمت على باب الجنة فإذا عامة من دخلها المساكين وإذا أصحاب الجد محبوسون إلا أن أصحاب النار قد أمر بهم إلى النار. Right. There's another variation of this hadith that says the following. يدخل الفقراء الجنة قبل الأغنياء ب500 عام. Again, it's an authentic hadith in Sunan al-Tirmidhi. Of course, there's a way to understand this, because we had some companions who were أغنياء, who were wealthy. What did the two hadiths state? The two hadiths are saying this. One hadith is saying that the righteous and pious people who have a scarcity of worldly things, maybe they're poor, will enter Jannah before the wealthy of this ummah by hundreds of years. Right? Again, reality in the akhirah is different. Time in the akhirah is different than the time in the dunya. The other hadith says that whereas people of poverty who are righteous, patient, will enter Jannah, the people who had a lot of money, فَإِذَا أَصْحَابُ الْجِدِّ مَحْبُوسُونَ, they will be what? They will be blocked and barred. They will be held until they're held account. Why is this? Why is this? What is this talking about? What is this talking about? He's giving this as an example. He's giving this as an example. Where is your attachment? Again, we had Abdurrahman ibn Auf, Sayyidina Uthman bin Affan, very wealthy companions at the highest level of piety. Right? This is not talking about wealth or poverty. But this is talking about responsibility and accountability. If you're someone who has a lot of dunya, then guess what? This dunya will naturally consume you and you'll be responsible for a whole lot of things. Again, some people, some people, to be able to be a person who has millions, you need to be someone who is utterly devoted to many responsibilities. Right? I got to focus on this business and that business and this meeting and that meeting and this meeting, which I had endless responsibilities. Sometimes these responsibilities cause me to not be able to enjoy my money. How many people who have a lot of money, they're like that? They're wealthy. They have a lot of money, they can't enjoy it. Why? Because their whole life is consumed in accruing this money and preserving it. They can't enjoy it. Whereas you'll find on the other end, so when it comes to accountability, I have a lot of money, now what I'm going to do with it? I have to give zakah here, I have to give the rights of the fuqara there, and I have to do this and that there, right? Someone who is faqir, sabir, muhtasib, someone who's patient, again, their accountability is going to be a lot less. That's what it's talking about. So again, this is the third sign, coveting this world. Be very careful. What is your heart attached to? Don't make it something physical or material. Make it immaterial. Make it about Allah. Make it about the akhirah. Yes, still pursue the dunya. Go ahead, do it. It's fine. But be careful where you allow your heart to get attached. The last sign of wretchedness is having extended hopes, and that's what we've been discussing. So these are the 4 signs of wretchedness. The 4th one is, one of the signs of shaqawa is طول الأمل. These are one of the signs. So be very, very careful of this. Again, listing them out again. One of the signs of shaqawa is hard-heartedness, qaswatul qalb. Another sign of shaqawa is fuqdan al-haya, loss of shame. Another sign of shaqawa is what? Toxic worldly attachment, coveting the world in a toxic way. That's a 3rd one. The 4th one is what? طول الأمل, false hopes. Always thinking there's time when there really is. You don't know if there's time or not. These are the 4, and that's pretty much the lesson for today. Before we stand for adhan and for salah, we'll take a few questions, inshallah. I know I didn't leave much time for questions. I'm sorry about that. But let me see what we got here in terms of questions and see what I could address quickly. Okay. So I only got 3 questions here. Does anyone want to ask a direct question too? That's also open. Go ahead. Sorry, I can't hear the sister behind. Yeah, go ahead.
So you said something earlier about al-du'a, or not, sorry, not al-du'a. I guess it says something about there's no man with 2 hearts.
Yes.
I've seen a translation that it's literal in the sense that only women have 2 hearts because they have the ability to produce children. So then it's kind of confusing hearing you say it's whole different translations.
I don't know where that. What translation is it? You know which one it is? I don't know why they would translate it like that. It's not meant. Yeah, it's not meant to be about men. ما جعل الله لرجل من قلبين في جوفه. The reason why it's speaking as a rajul, because we're speaking about we're talking about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's how the surah starts out, Surah Al-Ahzab. But it's not speaking about men per se. Speaking about men or women, but when we talk about it on a human level, away from Quran, is there some credence to women's ability to multitask versus men? I think you'll find a lot of people who will speak about it through this lens. You'll find that people speak about men have this tendency to fixate, and women have this capacity to focus on many different things in a better way. That's why in the workspace, some of them end up excelling over men because of their ability to multitask. It's not completely untrue, but that's not what the ayah is talking about. That's what we should separate. It's not completely untrue, but that's not what the ayah is talking about. The ayah is giving us a general precedent that, hey, guess if you allow one attachment to dominate your heart, then that will likely take away from the timeshare and capacity you have to focus on the opposite attachment. It applies to men and women. Wallahu alam. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other direct questions? Any other direct questions? We have another question here. I have no true happiness in this world, and I want it to end. I fake my smile to everyone, and even to my family. I try to change. I'm really, really sorry to hear that you're in this disposition, and that you're feeling like this. Very, very, very commonly, if you're feeling like this, there are triggers, there are stressors that have led you to feel like this. And the best way to go about resolving this emotion is to talk with someone with clarity on how to unpack these emotions that you have. Because sometimes the nafs deceives you and forces you into certain ends, to feeling certain ways that you don't really need to feel. And sometimes it makes things disproportionate in your eyes. So really, really what you're feeling is very common. And I think a lot of people go through this and experience it. Don't be disheartened. The way that you get out of this is talk with someone about whatever it is that's triggering this. Unpack it, and maybe perhaps you'll find that Allah will open for you a way to resolve and reconcile these feelings that you're feeling. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you. Allahumma ameen. All right, so it's time for salah. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop here, and inshallah we will continue next week with the other subjects. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.